High fly ball into right field. She is gone. In a year that has been so improbable, the impossible has happened. This one by Mattingly. Oh, hang on to the roof. Goodbye, home run. Mattingly. Taco makes one. Deep left field. Down the line. That ball is out of here. Out of here. He's at the wall. And the
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Table Setters, covering all things Major League Baseball. As always, I'm Steve, joined by my tag team partner, Devin. What's going on, man?
What's up? AL East, man, our last division preview episode here. And I got to say, I've been trying to start these episodes off with like a little fun fact, a little nugget about these divisions and the history of the division. I don't have one for this one. All I'm going to say is trying to make notes and project and make picks for this division was so insane. I like deleted and rewrote over and over because I kept on changing my mind. And like, no matter who I put in last, I felt sick about my choice. Like, I felt like this is stupid. Like, I'm having this team finish in last place. So I'm all over the place. And I think if you're really honest with yourself, like anybody trying to make predictions for this division this year based on what has already happened, it's like nearly impossible.
Yeah, we definitely chose this last division, and it's the hardest one to pick here. One of the most fiercely contested battleground divisions that we have to talk about. You can talk about the narratives, you can talk about the rivalries, you can talk about all those things here. A lot of good storyline entering 2025. And looking at this chapter for this year, it's an emerging changing of the guard. Of course, we're going to talk about the star-studded lineups. We're going to talk about the offseason moves, the eternal struggle that is this division for supremacy, trying to find a way to become that team at the top. The Yankees are coming not only just as the American League East champions, but they are the defending American League champions representing this division in the World Series. But this is not the Yankees that just took the field a couple months ago. This is a completely different team. And I think all these teams look a little bit different as well. And we also have a lot to talk about with the Rays being not playing in their normal hollowed grounds of Tropicana Field. That's going to play a little bit to this division, how things work out, because no matter how you slice it, playing outdoors in Tampa all year round is certainly going to do a couple things. I mean, it may make the Rays tired, but it also may expedite some of the offense in that hot air. I don't know what to expect from seeing them play at George Steinbrenner Field. What will that do to the team? Will it help them? Will it hurt them? But these are all things you have to bake into this giant cake that is the American League East.
There's no doubt about it. And then you have the Orioles, who obviously have been one of the best teams in the division for a couple years now. A couple years ago, it seems like they kind of arrived a little bit earlier than everyone expected. And then last year, I don't want to say came back down to earth, but just their season was a little more bumps in the road, I would say. And still made it to playoffs, but they just have not been able to make any noise once they get there for these past two seasons. So pressure is on them. They've gotten a healthy amount of criticism from around the league as far as what you've done with the extra talent. We're talking about the Heston Kjerstads of the world, but there's other guys too that are looming. Kobe Mayo has obviously been given a little bit of a chance, but hasn't delivered. What do you do with him? Samuel Basayo is looking damn good in those spring breakout games. What are you going to do with him when he's ready to be here? And on and on and on. So like the Orioles are fascinating. And the Red Sox, man, like loaded up a little bit here. This division, it's anybody's guess, man. Anybody's guess. This is tough. You just got to find your reasoning and support your answer. And it's really hard to argue that someone is dead wrong, no matter where they're putting these teams 1 through 5.
Yeah, definitely an interesting conversation. And this, among all baseball conversations, this is a firm example of why this is a war of attrition, why it doesn't happen overnight, why you have to weather the storm. That is not just the season of baseball, the off season of baseball. We saw a lot of changes just in the last month or so with, the aforementioned New York Yankees. But let's start with the Baltimore Orioles. You mentioned them before here. A fascinating team. We discussed it at length here on this podcast. If you are familiar with table setters, we've been pounding the pavement, playing the trumpet, whatever euphemism you want to use, of getting this Oriole team to hit its maximum potential and finding a way to have them trade for an arm that is reasonable. Whether it's Dylan Cease, whether it's Sandy Alcantara that we mentioned before, we have to find a way to maximize this window for the Baltimore Orioles, because we look at the youthful offensive talent, starting with Gunnar Henderson. We love what he has to offer, becoming a franchise player and one of the best young players in baseball. Adley Rutschman, Jordan Westberg is another player we want to look at. All down the list. This is an exciting lineup. Did they do enough this offseason? The one thing I will say, and this is not offensively, is the return of Felix Bautista to me looms very large here. A vital bullpen anchor. We mentioned this on our last episode for the NL East, talking about people forgot a little bit how Ronald Acuna Jr., how good he was or is. I think a lot of people forgot how dominant Felix Bautista was. There was an argument that he should win the AL Cy Young the year he was out there. This dude was lights out. And you cannot overstate how important a lights out closer is in the game of baseball. Sometimes it's a merry-go-round. You can't find them. And Felix Bautista winds up being that guy that he was 2 years ago. Everybody look out, because I think that brings a different confidence to the team. So offensively, they'll be okay. I think we look at their offense. I think what raised eyebrows this offseason was the cautious approach. We felt like they were going to move their money in the middle of the table, and David Rubenstein did promise increased spending. Definitely under-delivered. So everyone's looking at this as like the guys on the field have to deliver this year, or we're going to be wondering why you're slamming this window shut after it was left open. We want this window shut all the way open so we can see competitive baseball at Camden Yards.
Yeah, it was just another curious, like strange move. Listen, I like Tyler O'Neill. I like him. He's been a guy I've tried to bring on my fantasy team over the years a few times. He can hit for a lot of power. He can run a little bit. He's injury prone, but like I like the player. But like the one spot they didn't really need any help was offense from the outfield. Like you had enough of that and other pieces you could use there. Strange. But you're right. Offensively, they should be fine. They have firepower there. Cedric Mullins, it's interesting to see what his arc is going to be this year. He's really struggled in spring. You wonder if he might end up being phased out at some point. Got to love Colton Cowser. And again, we'll see what Heston Kjerstad is this year or what kind of time he gets. I think it's time to give him every day, but we'll see. The Orioles have been very hesitant seemingly to do that. Infield is great all around there. Gunnar Henderson has a little bit of an oblique problem that he's still hoping for opening day, but in the long run, it doesn't sound like a big problem. Me on offense, I'm looking at Jackson Holliday, wondering if he can deliver now, because it's one thing for him to come up and struggle last year. If he comes out of the gates again and really has a rough April and can't get going, then you start feeling like the Jared Kelenic stuff in Seattle, where it's like, all right, do we send him back down again and then bring him back up when he gets hot in AAA and then he doesn't deliver? It's this yo-yo effect. And next thing you know, post-hype, eventually post-hope, like I called Kelenic possibly in the NL East episode. And I know that sounds crazy, like, oh, you're rushing a little bit. These things happen quick, man. Like there's guys that a year ago we were so excited to see soon, and we're already like, yeah, I don't know about that guy. So like it does happen quickly. Jackson Holliday, I think most people are strong believers in the dude. I'm a believer in him for sure, but we got to see it. You got to see it at the big league level. But you mentioned it. The ultimate question is pitching. Like, do they have enough pitching? I just Zach Eflin at the top, Dean Kramer back in the mix. They signed Charlie Morton was their other signing. Guy in his 40s, like not the expectation for what we thought they were going to do. Sagano coming over here has looked good in spring. Cade Povich for a few weeks was looking fantastic in spring. Had a little bit of a rough outing on Friday, but I think he looms large for sure until Grayson Rodriguez comes back. You need Povich to kind of deliver and be more than people are expecting. He was up here last year and showed signs like a lot of young pitchers, and then had a lot of rough outings as well. You got to hope he takes the ball and run with it. Grayson Rodriguez, man, like he has to be the X factor on this team. The team needs an ace. Zach Eflin's not the ace. You need Grayson Rodriguez to be that guy we were all hyped about for years. Again, another guy that's entering that post-hype phase and has seemingly had all these difficulties recently of, feeling good out there. Like the arm problems again. It's such a big X factor what they get out of Grayson Rodriguez, because I know like they did this a lot last year when you had guys get hurt and you were able to put a guy like Suarez, right? Albert Suarez out there to eat innings, and he over-delivered. But how long are you going to hope that guys like that continue to over-deliver before you're looking out there and like, oh, they came back down to earth, and now as a team we are under-delivering? So the Orioles still, all the potential in the world, really fun offense. The story, I think, all year will be pitching.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's not a simple math equation, but when you lose Corbin Burns and replace him with an aging Charlie Morton, I mean, that is the math equation that people are seeing. And ultimately, the depth behind Grayson Rodriguez when he gets back on the field and Zach Eflin is totally thin. You mentioned the names there. But really, I mean, the talented young core, we all know how good they can be. They're going to be competitive. They're going to be in games offensively. But I really believe at the ultimate end of the year, we're going to say their cautious strategy limited their playoff success or lack thereof. I think that they will be there at the end. They're going to be there fighting for their playoff lives, and they can catch magic in a bottle. If Grayson Rodriguez gets healthy, because again, he's battling some injuries here and finds a way to be on the field and be the ace we know, there's still a lack of depth behind those players. If they go out and maybe acquire a Dylan Cease, Sandy Alcantara, like they go out there and they go for those pitchers and they make a difference paired with that offense. And like you said, Jackson Holiday, if he takes the next step, there's a lot of ifs that didn't have to be though. I feel like this team could have went in with a lot of certainty of just spending the money that they promised the fan base they would have spent with some certainty things. I mean, you can kind of look at the players that were available. And like you said, they're getting Tyler O'Neill when you're muddying an outfield. And in a lot of ways, Tyler O'Neill, I don't think makes the team worse because you look at his projections, over 20 home runs and approaching 70 RBIs, whatever he's going to bring to the table. There's guys that you've been blocking with other players, and then you add another guy to the mix that's going to block playing time for Heston Kjerstad. And you have to believe that these guys are who they are. Otherwise, you should have traded them out when they were at their highest value. Now everyone's just kind of sitting and they're not playing it. It's just so messy. And I don't know. I think that there is a lot to be conversated about as we continue to go down the list. But, it's one of those things we continue to have a conversation about.
Yeah, for me, in the end, man, like it's if they are where they hope to be or somewhere around there at the deadline, the question's going to be, will the front office do what is necessary this time? Because last year they swung and they missed. They didn't even swing. They took a check swing and hit a little bouncer right back to the pitcher thrown out at first. Like, they need to swing this time. There likely are going to be guys available, or at least a guy. Sandy Alcantara is probably going to be there. Dylan Cease, we don't know, because if the Padres are playing pretty well, like why move him at that point? But there's going to be someone you can go get. It's got to be better than Trevor Rogers. That's what you got to do. So Orioles are still exciting, but the story has quickly turned to like 2 years ago, kind of like the Nationals are like, oh, this is kind of a fun team now, right? Like they might start turning the corner, some fun guys to watch development, to all of a sudden like, oh, they got better way quicker than we expected. They're really good, to like, oh, they should be now competing for a World Series. They're gonna do great, and they're gonna acquire guys because they have all these extra guys. That was last year, if you're following me here, and they didn't do it. And ever since then, the goodwill is not there anymore as much. Now it's like, what the hell are these guys doing? This window is going to slam shut if they're not careful.
Yeah, dude, there's the report about just in general how they want to build the team, and like it sticks with me a little bit how they decided they want to build the team in vein of like, despite other teams, they want to do it differently. And I think this is not a science experiment. This is not your research project. You have a team that's ready to compete at the highest level. Don't get cute. Like, we know what works in baseball. Yep. And I think the Orioles are just refusing to, front office wise, commit to this strategy, because all they need is a little bit infused from talent that is established to keep this window open. Because you have a chance of ultimately failing to not. I mean, it's one thing if you have this window open for a few years and you're competitive, you don't get a World Series. That's forgivable. What's not forgivable is going out there and slamming the window shut yourself. Like, I feel like that's what they're doing here. And we got to make sure that you don't have an opportunity. We saw how bleak it was in Baltimore for a long time. You have an opportunity to go out there and compete at the highest level. I got to understand why you wouldn't take the opportunity in an affordable way too. By the way, you have a lot of young players that are on affordable deals. Find a way to get it done and put a team on the field that can win a championship. No ifs, ands, or buts. This team can do much better as far as, and it starts this year. Like, the trade deadline, find a way to maximize the potential of this team on the field. It's infuriating, and I'm not even a Baltimore Orioles fan.
Yeah, you got to put the cherry on top this year. But again, but now they have to hope they're in the position they want to be in come the trade deadline. They could have put themselves over the top in the offseason, but now you got to hope people stay healthy, which already is not looking exactly perfect, and you got to be in a good position where, like, if you look up in, mid-July, and you're like 10 games out for some reason, well, then they're not going to make the big move, and it just snowballs from there. So we'll see, man. It's an interesting story in Baltimore for sure, and it's getting more and more national coverage too of like what they maybe should have done and what they need to do in the future.
All right, let's head over to the Boogie Down Bronx for the New York Yankees. And the Yankees, of course, a lot of changes happening over there. They remain stacked offensively despite losing Juan Soto. And you look at the key additions, mostly this was the plan C that we talked about. Brian Cashman came out. Max Fried was the first domino to fall. They overpaid in a lot of people's minds for Max Fried, but he is an established ace. And man, he looks like he's much needed now with Garrett Cole going down. We'll talk about that injury in a second. Cody Bellinger, of course, is here. Devin Williams will be your lights out closer. And they added some veteran bats here. Paul Goldschmidt, of course, joining Aaron Judge, still a dominant presence in that lineup. We're hoping to eventually have another full year of Jazz Chisholm Jr. to look at as being comfortable. Anthony Volpe taking the next step. But really, I'm glad we're doing this episode last, because I think if we would have been talking about this a few weeks ago before the news dropped with Garrett Cole and Giancarlo Stanton being out long term, changes the whole trajectory of this division. That's not hyperbolic. That's just facts at this point. We have Garrett Cole going down with Tommy John surgery. He's out for the year. Giancarlo Stanton has things going on with both elbows, and now he's dealing with the calf strain. Feels like he's going to be out potentially all year as well. The offense, a little bit uncertain now beyond Judge, because you look at some of the questions with Paul Goldschmidt. Can we get a full season at Cody Bellinger? Can we get him being consistent? Is he more of the MVP player that we've seen in the past? Will there be some regression in those regards? What will this look like beyond Juan Soto? I do like the offense. I really do. But a post Juan Soto offense completely looks different. It changes everything for this team. And they're going to be now they're going to be more of pitching, which I think they wanted with Cole and Free. That's a completely different mindset. So it's going to be interesting to see how this gets off the jump. I wonder if they feel a certain type of way with the bad news of these two injuries, and if there's any more adversity that comes their way. And we know it's baseball season, and it's a war of attrition. We're going to have more adversity coming their way. I just hope that they don't get down on themselves and start to think, woe is me, Murphy's Law type of stuff, where the season just gets out of control pretty quickly.
I don't think they'll be woe is me, like get down on themselves, but I am so close to being out on the Yankees right now. And really just for the injury things, the offense has the potential to be fun, but I'm not as sold on it as you sound like you are right now. It's just Judge is going to need to be elite again, like elite, which there's no reason to think he won't be. I know he's struggling in spring, and some Yankee fans are like, should we be worried? The answer is no, you shouldn't be worried. It's Aaron Judge. He'll be okay. But he's going to have to be unbelievable. And the thing is, they had Judge and Soto both being unbelievable last year. So even if Judge is that again, like who fills those shoes? Bellinger has looked fantastic in spring. It's hard for me to convince myself we're going to get that all year from him. Goldschmidt is older. I think he'll be a streaky player. I still think he'll be pretty solid. But for me, multiple players on both sides of the ball are going to have to over deliver. They're going to have to overperform for the Yankees to be where they want to be, in my opinion. The rotation, the question at this point is like, can they keep their heads above water? Like, not, you mentioned Cole, you mentioned, Luis Heel, obviously. Clark Schmidt gets scratched today with a shoulder thing. And Boone's quote was not exactly reassuring. Said something along the lines of like, he's not really like bouncing back the way he usually does. So it sounds like something's going on with Clark Schmidt too. Like, if that's the case, I mean, Jesus, like at some point it's like, all right, well, we don't have a whole lot left here. You're already relying obviously on Marcus Stroman now, who a few weeks ago, the story was like, he's saying he doesn't want to be in the bullpen and like we need to trade him out of town. Like now he's a integral piece of this rotation. No joke. Like he is so important to this rotation. I mean, Carlos Rodon is starting opening day. Here's the thing. Max Fried, I think we know what we're going to get from Max Fried. I expect Max Fried to be Max Fried. I expect him to be really, really good, give you lots of innings. I'm not worried about Max Fried. But like, what do you get after that? Carlos Rodon is going to have to be better than he's been for the Yankees the last couple of years and way more consistent. He's shown the good Carlos Rodon from time to time, but there's been way more bad than Yankee fans can tolerate this year. And And then you got Will Warren, who's a kid, and again, people have some high hopes for him to be a really good pitcher this year and turn the corner in his career. But if you lose Clark Schmidt to this as well, like where Carlos Carrasco he's next. Like I think he's about 5-6 years past his prime. So even if the offense is fun and it is pretty good, and these guys do better than we think, like they need to pitch, especially in this division. Like this division has a lot of offense around there. I'm worried, very, very worried about the Yankees. Other than the pitching, for me, other questions would go with like, can Dominguez play left field? And if he struggles out there, is it going to affect his offense? Like that's the last thing you need. We talked about Belly and Goldschmidt. Is that enough to kind of fill Soto's shoes? I'm excited about Jazz Chisholm a full year in Yankee Stadium to kind of end it on a positive note. But I think way more questions than answers right now for the Yanks.
Yeah, and I think really the domino effect of the injuries move guys up in slots, put pressure on guys that didn't have the same pressure they had a couple weeks ago. You named Jason Dominguez. There is a huge amount of pressure on him now to be not just get acclimated and play the outfield and hopefully things go well. Like they need him to play really well to keep this offense afloat. Ben Rice, there's a lot of pressure on him as well. I mean, third base was always going to be a question. They have Oswaldo Cabrera slotted as the starting third baseman so far. They didn't go out there and acquire Nolan Arenado. So the bottom half of that lineup, not that great. But again, looking at what we saw Luis Gil coming out of nowhere and doing what he did, rookie of the year, etc., there's a lot of hope for Will Warren. And again, a lot of question marks. And a lot of teams have these same question marks about figuring like these things have to break right if we make a run. I think Will Warren has potential to break out the same way Luis Gil did. The Clark Schmidt stuff, there's no denying it. It's definitely something that is troubling, especially with shoulder soreness. And you saw the Brian Hawk report that it wasn't that positive. So we'll see exactly what happens to Clark Schmidt. Anytime you hear shoulder, it's not great. But the Yankees might be in business to be trading for a pitcher as well. Maybe they're in on Dylan Cease. Maybe they're in on potentially trying to shake Michael King loose. Like if there is like the Padres not being competitive, obviously the Padres have to be really down and out to be trading Michael King. Sandy Alcantara that we mentioned before, like during the NL East episode, maybe they're in on him, but it's going to be very expensive. This team definitely, I mean, the Stanton stuff feels like it's a little overstated for me during the regular season. He is is a big piece to what they did. Obviously, it's fresh in everybody's mind in October. And he was a big piece of the offense all year, and he got hot, carried the team at certain points. But there was other points of the season where he was dead on his feet, and we didn't even have him. He was a ghost at bat. So this team has to find a way to get the maximum out of some of these players that you weren't expecting to put as much pressure on. The Cody Bellinger stuff, I liked how he looked in spring. You mentioned him looking good. We have to have realistic expectations about what we're going to get out of Belly for the full season. And the other interesting conversation that isn't just about the Yankees, but about Goldschmidt and eventually his bid for the Hall of Fame. I think he's on the cusp right now of potentially being a Hall of Fame player. So I think he's motivated by having a couple good years here in the Bronx. If he can go out there and have 2 good years, I think that will go a really long way for Hall of Fame voters. So I think he's motivated to go out there, and he's batting cleanup in a Yankees lineup right now. Who would have thought Paul Goldschmidt could be out there doing what we're seeing here? And like you said, Judge probably gonna hit 50 home runs again, but he can't be the only guy in this lineup that's hitting for power and hitting for average. He has to find a way to get some support here. I like a lot of pieces here. At the end of the day, I'm going to ride and die with this team, but the health is the biggest concern for me in spring right now, and that's unfortunate. Fangraphs and Pagoda still have him as ultimately a favorite to go in this division, but it's hard to argue with. The problem is the Yankees not only got a little bit worse because of the injuries, and you can make the argument offensively they got worse without Soto, but they also are looking at the other teams getting better. And that's more of the conversation we're looking at. A lot of good stuff with the Orioles. We know what they were, but the Boston Red Sox, we'll talk about in a little bit here, took a lot of big steps forward. And you can make the argument that maybe they are passing the Yankees on the road back up to the top of the AL East. Who knows?
Yeah. And I'll just finish my thought on the Yankees here with saying, like, there's a lot of Yankee fans screaming at Brian Cashman right now. Like, go get Sandy Alcantara. Why in the world would the Marlins do that right now? First of all, the Yankees have been they hold on to their prospects very tight, which drives some fans crazy. But like we talked about it. Like, if you're gonna have a bidding in the NL East episode, we talked about the Marlins. Like, they want a bidding war between some of these teams with super high prospects all over the place, which is it's a very realistic thing to happen with a team like, say, the Cubs, the Orioles, the Tigers that we mentioned. Those are all teams that are expected to be in the playoff mix with unbelievable systems to like use as trade pieces for a guy like Sandy Alcantara. So, like, why give him to the Yankees right now? And I'm sure people will say, well, what if they give you Spencer Jones and then some other guys? I don't think that's enough. Like, if you want to give him Spencer Jones, George Lombard, and Jason Dominguez, yeah, Marlins will do that right now. But anything short of that, like, I don't know why. And to boot, like Chase Hampton, one of their highest pitching prospects, who's had a lot of success at the minor league level, big strikeout guy, one of the biggest strikeout guys at the minor league level the last year or two. He also went down with Tommy John. So it's just like, and there's been a couple other pitchers in their system, in the minors, high prospects that have gone down with injury. It's crazy what's happening with the Yankees right now. And sometimes this is just how it goes. And you got to hope it doesn't become a little bit of a lost season.
Yeah, and you look at other names in there. Ben Hess as well pops there. His ETA is 2027, but it's not like he can help you immediately this year. But the one thing I will say, if this season starts to spiral in a weird direction, I would just say play the kids. Get Spencer Jones in the lineup every single day. Find a way to put George Lombard and Jr. in the lineup. I feel like this is
He's what, like 19 years old or something though.
Who cares though at this point? If this season gets out of control, wouldn't you rather have George Lombard Jr. at third base rather than Oswaldo Cabrera? Cabrera at the end of the day is a utility player. If we're being honest with ourselves, third base is always going to be a black hole, and they punted on the position because of what they had elsewhere. They were like, okay, well, third base is going to be an automatic out for us on most days. Maybe Cabrera will have a game where he comes out and hits 2 home runs like he has every once in a while, every 2 weeks. But when you're going to the bottom of the line with Ben Rice and Cabrera at the bottom of the line with it, Ben Rice is your DH right now. That's what we're doing. You know what I mean? I like Ben Rice. I think he's been exciting. There's been a lot of fun stuff with it, but they're expecting a lot from Jazz Chisholm playing second. Anthony Volpe has to take a huge step forward. Can he be your franchise shortstop that we all know? Can he be more of the guy who hit the Grand Slam in the World Series rather than the guy who went into a slump last year? Can Paul Goldschmidt go out there and do what he does, be the Hall of Fame level player rather than the aging veteran that we saw at his tail end of his career in St. Louis? It's possible. I mean, we've had guys that people forget how good of a hitter Goldie was. And I understand St. Louis takes the appeal off a lot of people, but it's possible he comes out there and he carries a Yankees line. But that's the thing, though. You shouldn't have been hoping for that. That's not what we should be having the conversation about. Paul Goldschmidt should be the extra. If we get a good year out of him, he's just extra. Now you're putting a lot of reliance on some of these guys to go out there and be big pieces to your team. Where unfortunately, that's just baseball, Susan. Like, you know what I mean? That just like the injuries. You plan, and sometimes the baseball gods just laugh in your face. So, and other teams will deal with this. The storms will come. The clouds are right now over Yankee land, and it's raining down on them. But other teams will face this. Any championship season is paved with adversity. We saw the Dodgers overcome so much last year, and they were built for that. It's hard to imagine a path where the Yankees repeat what they did last year at all. Like, I mean, at all. But their pitching staff, I will say, though, I still like their pitching staff better than the Mets. I do. And I
Yankees?
Yeah, I like the Yankees pitching staff, even as is with the injuries, better than the Mets. And
Interesting.
yeah, I mean, I sound like you don't feel that way, but
No, not right now.
But yeah, I mean,
We
I'd
can
go
put
on
a little wager. How do we make a wager? We'll talk after the show or sometime soon about a wager, and then maybe present it on our next.
Yeah,
episode.
I don't want to blend too much of the divisions together as we preview them because people are tuning in for the American League East. But you're right, dude. A lot of question marks that we didn't have, and again, this is the benefit of doing this last because we have a lot more information. The heel stuff was already very, very saddening, but add on top of that Cole, add on top of that Stanton, and there's probably going to be other guys that get hurt down the line too. That's the other thing that sucks.
You are right, though. Before we move on, like it's fortunate we did this one last with all that stuff because I remember we recorded the AL Central one, and the day before we released it, Bobby Witt gets hit in the wrist, and I'm seeing all these reports like taking off with the trainer. I'm like, oh my god, we just like spent a bunch of time raving about the Royals' chances, mainly because of how good Bobby Witt is out there and makes everyone better. And obviously he's okay, which thankful. Our episode probably made more sense, but let's get to the, you mentioned him a little bit there in the Yankees talk, the Boston Red Sox, the arch rivals of the Bronx Bombers. Some big moves made a lot of teams, a lot of people jumping on the bandwagon. It's interesting. This last month or so has been a little bit of a roller coaster for them. Obviously, you brought in Bregman, which was kind of their final piece there. And then like very shortly after there, you had the thing with Devers talking about like, I'm a third baseman, I'm not DHing. And we're like, uh-oh, trouble in paradise. And then Tristan Casas gets in the act and says like, yeah, he wants Devers at third. And then they ask him about the big three prospects. And he's like, I don't think those guys are something along the lines of like, we don't want them here yet. Like we want these guys. He just said it in a way that came off wrong. And it was like, oh man, is drama going to take Boston down? And suddenly that seems like it was months ago. Like no one's talking about it anymore. Now everyone's just excited. Like Boston might win this division. You got to love what Boston did. They are another one of these teams where they had some really, really, really high prospects, good pieces, kind of rich down there in the minors. And unlike some other teams, they cashed in a couple chips while still holding on to some really good ones and got Garrett Crochet, who, I mean, you watch this guy and he looks like the real deal. I don't think there's going to be any slowdown for him. You got to love that piece. I do think the story about Devers is going to linger a little bit because now he's kind of changing his tune, saying he'll do whatever the team wants him to do. Obviously, someone got in his ear, but like, does he actually mean that? Is there going to be, there was also this story that came out and said that at one point he almost asked for a trade. And the timeline's a little mysterious, but I don't know if that story goes away completely. Now, listen, if the Boston Red Sox get out to a crazy hot start and go like 20-10 in their first 30 games, maybe that story does go away pretty quickly and it's all happy-go-lucky in Boston. But I'm watching for that. I love the product on the field, but it's Boston. You know, they have the Netflix special covering all that stuff this year, and the Boston's going to be in the limelight a lot. And if that is a story, that's not good for the clubhouse. I do think Alex Cora is the right man for the job. I do love what Alex Bregman brings to that team clubhouse-wise. I'm not sure what he's going to be as a player. He's probably going to end up being a little overpaid there, if not a lot overpaid, if you look at the AAV. But I do love the clubhouse stuff. There was that story that came out. He bought the big three, Marcelo Meyer, Roman Anthony, Christian Campbell. They're like suits. And one of them said it was like their first suit. And apparently some of the Astros vets, when Bregman was a rookie, did that for him and a few of the other guys there. So he's kind of passing it along. I love a lot of the stories coming out about Bregman. Some of the other things I wonder, Trevor Story, don't hear a lot about him. He could be a big piece for them. You got to wonder if he's going to stay healthy. And then I've mentioned the big three a few times here. They're a loaded offensive team. So you got to wonder, like, when and how do those three guys contribute this year, or do they? Because if they don't, then you start feeling a little bit like that Orioles situation where like these guys are too good to be in AAA still. What are we going to do with them?
It feels like it's wide open for them to be there. There's spots in the lineup that you can find them. You know, maybe there has to be a position change for them if that's possible, to be a little bit more versatile. But if I'm them, I find a way to get Anthony Meyer and also Christian Campbell in this lineup by hell or high water sometime during the season, because you fully put them all together with the lineup that starts with Jarren Duran. You mentioned Devers before, Bregman, Tristan Casas, and Trevor Story, and you somehow fit those other three in the lineup. Somehow, obviously, they're not playing catcher, but finding a way in the other three positions to find them in the lineup. I mean, the Red Sox would be a better team for it, but I think really the improvements on their end, committing significant resources, that they're taking it seriously, this opportunity to contend. They see it wide open. Of course, they didn't understand that the Yankees would have the injuries they have here, but now they look like all things in the rearview mirror, understanding just the scope of how quickly things can change. Looking at the Orioles, and this is a butterfly effect of the Orioles not taking effect of grabbing this division by the throat and strangling it, because as quickly as the Red Sox were quote unquote irrelevant or rebuilding or finding their identity, here they are again. Fenway Park popping off. There was exciting moments last year. They found ways to be competitive. The ownership is renewed to committing and energizing this team. And you can get the Jarren Duran piece and find a way. Tristan Casas. There's a lot of good player development in here that has expedited this process. I love the opportunity to watch Tristan Casas this year. I think he is going to thrive. Obviously, we had a conversation with the Red Sox earlier in the year. Tristan Casas was a big topic of conversation potentially in the trade market. They decided to hold on to him. and I think he's going to be better for it. And then we talk about post hype on players. It's not just if they're not good and all that. People are always looking for who's next. And Cassis has been here for a little bit. He's kind of been, I wouldn't say forgotten about, but people just accept that he's here. So it's like, okay, what's going to be next with Anthony or Campbell or Meyer? We want to see what they can do. But Cassis, let's not forget, I mean, we haven't seen the best of him quite yet. So pair that. They have a nice blend of young talent with veteran presence. Devers and Bregman bring like this winning piece to it. My only concern for this team, I mean, the bottom of the lineup is a little bit questionable. David Hamilton and stuff. We mentioned that could be reinforcements coming up middle of the year about finding a way to get these other guys in the lineup. But is the bullpen. I think that, you get Aroldis Chapman in there. Liam Hendricks is slotted as their closer right now. But the bullpen, to me, it's hard because bullpens are so hit or miss. You can't look at a bullpen on paper in the beginning of the season and understand what it is. We'll understand more of the bullpen, let's just say in May, to see what they're bringing out there and how it's utilized. Alex Cora has a history of being able to manage a bullpen and find the best out of them. But on paper, looking at some of the arms in there, I'm like, okay, this could be a weak spot. But the rotation itself with Garrett Crochet and Walker Buehler, Tanner Houck, they did a really good job this year. And I think a lot of people are on the bandwagon. They could take maybe a step back, some of these players, but I mean, it's hard to imagine they're not going to be competitive all year. I mean, it's a simple fact. They did a really good job of emphasizing what they did last year and building a well-rounded team. I mean, the Boston Red Sox are the real deal this year, and I think they're going to be lighting up all these different box scores all throughout the year. They're going to be a bitch to play for every team, including the Yankees.
Yeah, and I will say I do think Alex Cora is the best manager in the division, and sometimes that makes the difference in a close division. Like 1 through 5, these teams are all capable. Literally, I mean this when I say it. I think every team in this division is capable of winning the division. I do. I think them at their best, if things go right, every single team has the ability to win this division. This is the only division I would say that about. I think this is the only division that statement is true. 1 through 5, anyone could be the top team on any given, I don't know, timeline. But Alex Cora, to me, the best manager in the division. Andrew Bailey did an unbelievable job with their rotation last year, getting the most out of some of these guys. We talk about Tanner Houck, who was great last year. For the first half of the season, Cutter Crawford was unbelievable. That's the other thing about this. They have depth as well. If you look at MLB.com's like projected opening day roster for them, they list the 5 guys as Garrett Crochet, Tanner Houck, Walker Buehler, Richard Fitz, Lucas Giolito. You didn't even say Brian Bayo. You didn't even say Cutter Crawford, like partly because of injury stuff, but like you have depth. Garrett Whitlock is a bullpen piece right now. He's shown the ability to be a good starter, just hasn't been able to stay healthy. So like you have plenty of depth there as well. Giolito is like a forgotten dude. This is a guy that at one point was a star pitcher. I don't know if he's actually going to start the season in the rotation. I think maybe he comes in a little later than opening day from what I've read, but they're deep. So yeah, I guess bullpen, if you're going to poke a hole, that's probably the one. Let's wait and see how that does. But you got to love the roster right now on paper.
Yeah, I mean, looking at Wilyer Abreu, David Hamilton, and maybe Rafaela. Rafaela had a good spurt last year where he was a young player, came up. But can't you just see a world where they fit Campbell, Anthony, and Meyer somewhere in that mix of just like fit them in?
Well, I've read there's at least rumors of possibly, I guess Abreu is going to miss the opening of the season. Like he's their starting right fielder, but he's had some like viral illness, been set him back for weeks. So like if they don't feel like he's ready to open the season, maybe Anthony fills in for him at that point until he gets back. But again, it's tricky with these high prospects. Do you want them to be fill-ins and then send them back? Or do you want them just to like play regularly and not bring him up here until you know it's his spot?
But if he blows it out of the water, Abreu has no kick coming. Like, see you later.
Wilyer Abreu was pretty damn good last year. Like,
but
I'd have to
same with Rafaela though. But if you want this fully realized, these 3 guys, similar to the Orioles, they have to have an opportunity to play, and you can't have them be like, "Oh, Anthony can play, then he's going to sit. We're going to let Abreu." Like, if they're called up, you're right. They have to be able to play. And again, if you feel like Abreu is a valuable asset, trade him to somebody. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like trade Rafaela as well. They have to find a way to make room, like the Moneyball scene where they have Carlos Pena playing and they're like, Pena can't play first. It's like, why? Because he's got traded. You have to find a way to make no excuse to not have these guys in the lineup. It's easy to draw it up every day and be like, who's the better matchup? If Abreu and Rafael aren't there, you have to find a way to get them out of there, because if you're committing to Meyer, Anthony, and Christian Campbell being in that lineup, and you call them up, they can't sit on the bench. They just can't.
Willie Abreu, a lot of people thought he should be in the top 3 for AL Rookie of the Year. Wasn't named one of them, but like, it's crazy to think like this guy's young too, and we're just running him out of town. I understand what you're saying though, because you do need to kind of make a decision with these guys. I mean, in that spring breakout game, all 3 of those dudes, Meyer, Campbell, and Roman Anthony,
or
all
trade one of those 3 dudes.
crazy.
Then, if you feel like the window's open, commit, trade them. You know what I mean? Like,
but these teams have options to play with, and they, like the Orioles have with Heston Kjerstad, up and down. I don't think it's good for the player. I don't think the up and down.
No.
Oh, and then especially if you bring him up, like they've with Kjerstad, the worst thing the Orioles have done is bring him up, and then he plays like every 3rd day. It's like, at that point, what are we doing? Like, what do we? So it's not an easy problem to have. I'll be honest. It's a good problem to have, but like if you let it snowball out of control a little bit, suddenly it's a bad problem to have, and you're hurting these kids' development. So, I would be fascinated to see how they strategize and go through that.
All right, well, let's head to Tampa Bay here. And we mentioned before the Tropicana Field situation that they are no longer playing at the Trop. There is definitely drama happening with the stadium stuff and potential movement. Sale of the team, will that be a distraction for them? But as we sit for 2025, they will be playing at George M. Steinbrenner Field. Pitching is Tampa's calling card. Of course, Shane McClanahan is going to be returning as the ace. You can look at Taj Bradley, Shane Baz, and their bullpen. There's some depth here. It definitely is a true Tampa prototype here. There's some organizational strength here. They always put together a strong bullpen. Maybe we're giving them too much credit here. But again, offense remains a little bit questionable. But with the reliance on Junior Caminero now at this point, now there feels like there's a guy in the middle of that lineup. Like, okay, we have a guy we can get to and build around, because he is every bit of the threat we're looking for, potentially a 30 home run guy. We could see him in a full season here, locking down third base, which is a hard position to have here. I mean, the Rays this offseason were true to form. We know who they are. They're not going to go out and spend all this money. They were never in the Juan Soto sweepstakes. Surprise, surprise. They make economical moves. No major offensive upgrade, but at the end of the day, like, their organizational competence has made us believe that no matter what they do, there's a solid floor and they're never going to bottom out. But there is a world, you mentioned before, that they're able to surpass the divisional heavyweights, because you look at the Red Sox, you look at the Yankees, some of the things that happen to those teams are because of the lack of depth, or just like, Murphy's Law, things happen. The Rays are kind of even keel. They'll be there to take it if it's there. And I think there's an opportunity this year to be a shark in the water and surprise some people. And I think playing at George Steinbrenner Field in Tampa Bay will be an asset. I think they may not have as many fans there. I think 11,000 is the capacity. It may definitely not have a major league level type of clubhouse. That might be not the affordability you're looking for as far as keeping players happy. But I think playing outside in July in Tampa Bay, I think this offense is going to be better for it. And it's going to be exhausting for other teams to be out there as well. So I think this will be a more positive than a negative playing outside in Tampa. Yeah,
this is a very Rays team, man. Like, this is the Rays we've gotten used to. Where like the offense is just enough and just pesky enough and has just enough pop to support a really good rotation. It's the best rotation in the American League East to me by far. The question remains like health. A lot of these guys are coming back from some big-ish injuries, but you got your ace McClanahan back out there. That's exciting. And to boot, like Ryan Pepio, Shane Baz, Taj Bradley, Drew Rasmussen, who they brought back last year and would have him kind of throw 1-2 innings, really wants to be a starter. We'll see what they do with him as the year goes, but he can be really, really good as well. Zach Little, if you need him as well. Joe Boyle, they acquired in the Jeffrey Springs deal. Joe Boyle can throw like a bazillion miles per hour. His problem is he can't throw strikes. Who can fix that? Probably the Rays. And he's looked better in spring, so he may be a guy that is difficult to keep out of the rotation at some point. You got to love the rotation. I'm a little bit – you said you think the ballpark can be a positive. I'm not too worried about the ballpark. I am concerned about the ownership, selling the team drama thing that is going on now. That's a huge concern.
Yep.
The St. Petersburg, whatever, that basically said that bridge has been burned. Like straight up, it's been burned. And now pressure to sell, and will they stay in Tampa? That's a big distraction, man. Like as much as you're going to try to tune it out.
Do you think that bleeds on the field, though? You think that the players are hearing that so much? Like they'll be asking the questions with, Tampa Bay Suns out there asking those questions that will bleed into production on the field, or you think they can quiet that noise? I don't know. It feels like this Rays team is immune to it because I feel like it's always been a question. I mean, maybe it's more pressing now because it's
been like
so
a rumor, but now it's like front page news, like fact kind of stuff. I worry about it a little bit. I'll be honest. Like I think it could in a division that's so closely contested with a lot of talent. You don't like that in the background for sure. Like I think all the other teams benefit from not having that going on and not having to answer questions about that. So yeah, that's my biggest concern on this team, which maybe is a good thing because then you're saying like you really like the roster. Excited to watch Caminero for a whole year for sure. Surprised they didn't trade more pieces. I think a lot of people thought a Yandy Diaz, Brandon Lau might be moved, and they were not, which I'm happy about to see that. Like, go see what they can do. Josh Lowe's another guy, still young, that I'm interested in seeing how he puts a full season together. A little disappointing last year. People expected more, but still a lot of talent. So they're a fun team. Jonathan Aranda is another guy I think is going to get a longer look this time. He's only had these little short spurts at the major league level. Has the ability to be a hell of a hitter. So they're a weird team, man. When we get to projections, you're going to see that I had a very predictions for the standings. Very difficult time with them.
So before we move to Toronto, just another question just about the ballpark. Now that I'm like playing this out in my head, you mentioned them being the best rotation and the lineup has potential. In a world they make a World Series run, what do they do? Like in October, are they playing a World Series at George Steinbrenner Field, 11,000 people? Or are they going to move them somewhere like they did during the COVID season? Or are you just rolling out playing at a spring training park for the World Series? That seems insane.
Nah, man, the Marlins ballpark will be free at that point. So no, I think they I'm pretty sure that question was already answered where they said for the A's and the Rays, if they're in the playoffs, their home games will be at some other fields, which hopefully it's not like a neutral field. That would be shit for the team. But no, I don't think they're playing playoff games in a
the Rays were used to
place.
that. They played the World Series in Texas that time with the Dodgers, right? That was them, right?
Was that? I'm having a hard time. Was that 2020?
I believe it was. That was Randy.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Blake Snell getting pulled by Cash, probably too early. Okay. Yeah. You're right. Business as usual.
Question. Yeah, no, business as usual. The American League Championship Series goes through Sacramento and Tampa Bay.
They could play at the Buck Stadium. The Savannah Bananas just sold that shit out.
You're Raymond James? Nice.
Yeah, man. Let's do
that. Was a wild scene, by the way.
That was very wild.
Are you bought like not to go too far off the path? Are you bought into the Savannah Banana stuff at all? Like, do you feel like any sort of like?
Always been a fan. I've always been a fan of it, and like a year or two ago, I feel like I was really motivated. Like, I really want to see these guys, and I've seen other like hardcore baseball fans come out and be like, "I hate this. I hate it. This is the worst." And that kind of makes me feel like, should I not like this? I'm kind of in between. Like, here's a good thing. It's like these guys are legitimate baseball players that just like have not been able to get to the spot they want to. So like it gives more players legit jobs, right? Sure. Rather than toiling in the low minors and like getting paid crap and things like that. I don't know how much they make, to be honest, but the Bananas are doing really well. So I hope they're getting a decent check there. It's entertainment. If you're a baseball fan trying to be like, this isn't baseball. Yeah. No shit. It's not baseball. It's entertainment. It's Harlem Globetrotters. I never thought baseball would find a way to do a Harlem Globetrotters kind of thing. And the fact that they figured it out is pretty cool. So I'm not going to sit here and bash on the Savannah Bananas.
So we'll talk more about that more in the future. Of course, that was a big feat. We definitely want to mention it there. So shout out to Savannah Bananas. But let's go to Toronto Blue Jays here. Made some aggressive offseason moves. Of course, they've missed out in the past, but Anthony Santander, Max Scherzer definitely signaled some urgency that they wanted to get somebody in-house. And the other piece, too, is Vlad Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette's possible final years in Toronto. This headlines a potent lineup, in my opinion, that they're motivated. But in the same breath, that could be looked at as a weakness. Obviously, Bichette and George Springer are coming off career worst seasons. Andres Jimenez as well, like we forgot. I mean, so early on in the offseason that he's over there. They lack consistent offensive production. So, Toronto, you can't say anything, but they did invest heavily. They tried their best to spend money. No one would take the Canadian dollar at any moment. They wanted so badly to spend it. But there is, some fundamental lineup holes that needed to be addressed. Now it remains to be seen if these things that they've done have done such a thing. Does Anthony Santander solve the woes of this lineup? Look at the Fangraphs projections that there is some improvement that will be seen, but there is a high variability on player bounce back. And I never like to have that here. Like there's such a big piece to people bouncing back because on paper, you look at the lineup like pretty damn good. But I think we have the black cloud of last year hanging over us of like, it was so ugly last year for some of these guys.
Dude, this team could win 70 games. It also could win like 95 games. Like, honestly, it is so confusing. I'll start with Bo Bichette. He is right up there with top X factors in this division. Almost forgotten about. Spring training has been encouraging. I've said that about a lot of players. And let's say I've said that about 15 players over these division previews. Half of those guys are probably not going to do well, right? So because you can't just buy every, big spring training, but it's better than for a bounce back guy. It's better than seeing him come out listless again. So Bo Bichette hitting 353 in spring so far, 2 home runs, and one of the home runs a couple days ago, absolute bomb, just completely ripped, and that's good to see. Like hitting it with authority. Vladdy's also hitting 344 in spring. So like you got your 2 dudes swinging it right now. If you're a Blue Jay fan, you're kind of like, hey, can we start the season now? But Bo Bichette, such a huge X factor. Obviously, Vladdy is as motivated as ever, trying to get that big bag that he wants. That I think is probably a little unrealistic, but he's going to be motivated. And certain guys, it affects poorly because they squeeze the bat a little too tight and put too much pressure on themselves, like I think Pete Alonso did last year. And other guys thrive, like a Juan Soto. We'll see what Vladdy does in that situation. I think a lot of the success goes to their pitching, starting and bullpen. Start with the starters. First of all, Kevin Gausman. He still ended up with decent statistics at the end of last year, but really struggled at times, wasn't the guy we've been used to, and it all goes to his splitter. Splitters are all of a sudden all the rage. But for a few years there, like he was the king of the splitter. Just absolute crazy movement. He's lost some of the movement. He's gotten a little velocity back in his pitches in spring from what I've read. Mixed results. But they need that dude to be the ace. And I don't know if he's still capable of that. Like, I don't know if that splitter is getting back to what it once was. That's not to say he won't still be a very serviceable pitcher. He seems to go out there and give you 30 starts a year. But like for him to be an elite pitcher, which they probably need to try to win this division, he needs that splitter back, that movement. So you start with him. Max Scherzer, again, he's looked good in spring. I just still think he's at the point in his career where he's that guy that is going to be in and out of the lineup, on and off the IL. When he's healthy, there's going to be times he looks like the old Max. Other times he's going to give up a bunch of bombs and be out in 4 innings, not very effective. It's going to be back and forth. Now, I think the Blue Jays know that. I don't think they're expecting 30 starts from the dude. Go out there and give us what you got. But it'll be interesting to see how much they get out of Max. If they get more than we think, I mean, that's a huge, huge plus. And then the other piece of that rotation that I'm watching is Bowden Francis. Almost no-hit the Mets last year until Francisco Lindor had another big late-inning homer. But Bowden Francis down the stretch was unreal, one of the best pitchers in the league. So we got to see if this dude is real. See if that was legit or if he's going to come back down to earth. Spring, he hasn't been outstanding. But there's also been write-ups of like, if you are high on this guy, you should not be high on him now because of the spring stuff. We'll see when the lights turn on what he looks like. But the biggest thing is the bullpen. Their bullpen, and we talked to Mike Wilner about this in the middle of the season last year, like why they were underperforming. And he mainly, yeah, sure, we talked about Bo Bichette, but he really tore apart the bullpen. Guys underperformed big time there. 29 blown saves, which is right up there with the Cubs, who we talked about that situation of one thing they need to do better this year to get where they want to go. 4.82 bullpen ERA, second worst in the league. The only team that was worse was Colorado, and they're playing at Coors Field. So, like, really, really bad. They cannot be that bad again. Jeff Hoffman, a big offseason signing there to help in that bullpen. These guys got to deliver, man, because even if the offense does deliver and Bo Bichette does get back to what we expect, and the starting pitching, Gausman, gets a splitter back, and Max gives you more starts than we think, and Bowden Francis is for real. Well, if they're blowing leads, it's not going to matter. So bullpen, huge. I didn't even mention Santander. I mean, I think that's nice. You got another power bat in there. What's to complain about? Andres Jimenez giving you some better defense. Like that's quality too. You got some young pieces there that you've acquired that should contribute. So there's a lot to like, to be honest. But I do think you mentioned the word variability, right? There's a lot of variables here as far as, or volatility. We'll use that V word instead, as far as where these guys are going to be.
Yeah, and I think the divisional X factor for me is a little bit unique for this. And I think it's pitching health across the board. And you look at each of these teams here, looking at all of them together. Obviously, the Yankees losing Cole shifts some of the power balance. Tampa is resting squarely on McClanahan's arm as well. I mean, they have more depth than everybody else. The Orioles and the Blue Jays are definitely overcoming some of the pitching questions, but I think the Red Sox are the most balanced looking at the full rotation. So it should be fascinating how this shakes out. What is your X factor as far as player or other thing? Like I took a little liberty with the creativity of picking my X factor.
Yeah, and I've taken some liberties as well over these divisions. This one I tried to limit to one player. Jazz Chisholm, to me, which I don't think would be a popular pick here, but to me, I think as far as which team is going to affect all the others the most, I think it's the Yankees. I think what the Yankees do affects the other four teams more than any other one. And I think Jazz Chisholm needs to be that second offensive force that they lost. I think a lot of people are expecting it to be Bellinger. I just don't have that expectation. I think he's going to be very good at times. I think he's going to be hurt sometimes. And I think he's going to be looking like he cannot even see the ball sometimes. I think that's who Cody Bellinger is now. So I think Jazz Chisholm is the one with the legitimate potential to become not just a star because he's pretty good and he's flashy, but a star because he delivers numbers like full season. That is my expectation. So he's my X factor. As far as 1 through 5, dude, I texted you about an hour before the show. Like, this is impossible. I went back and forth a lot. This is what I went with. It even pains me to read because, like, I feel like I'm going to be so wrong about so many things, but I have the Red Sox at the top. I do think I like them the most. Well-rounded, all around what they did, what they had, what they have coming, manager, everything all together. They're my division winner. As much as I've criticized them, I still like the Orioles a lot. I'm going to put them at number 2. I think the offense is going to carry them, and I'm going to give the front office one more opportunity to then go cash in some chips for a big pitcher. And this is where I think it'll get surprising for people, and there's no way in hell you and I have the same one this time. I have the Blue Jays 3rd. I don't know. I'm feeling weird about this division tonight. I might wake up tomorrow and be like, what the hell was I thinking? But I have the Blue Jays 3rd. I told you I'm almost out on the Yanks. I have them coming here 4th. I just think this is going to get to the point of too many things to overcome. That's my feeling right now with them. And maybe it turns really quickly. If any team needs a hot start in April, it's them. They need to get off to a rousing start. And this is the one that actually pains me the most because there was a part of me at one point, like, I think the Rays might win this division, and I have them finishing in the cellar here. And I don't know. I can't even reason it. They're not a last place roster. They're not a last place team. My reason will be, I guess, the ownership ballpark stuff. I don't like that that's in the background, and you got to have a reason. So that's going to be my reason here.
So, man, we couldn't be any more diametrically different. I have the Rays winning this division.
There you go.
And I went through it, and I was having a hard time, but this feels like a Rays year to come out there. And I think ultimately, as I mentioned before, the X factor, I think the team that stays the healthiest will determine who emerges the top of this division. And I have the Yankees number 2, Red Sox number 3, Orioles number 4, and the Blue Jays coming in last, and 3 playoff teams coming from here as well. I really
agree on that.
Yeah, I like the Red Sox a lot, but I just think that there is. I mean, I think the Yankees are being right now. It's the sexy pick to pile on what's going on. I think at some point they will adjust, but I could see it being flipped upside down. That's the beautiful part about this division. Like we, flip it upside down like an hourglass, and you if we looked at this and had complete opposite results at the end of the year, I wouldn't be shocked. It's one of these divisions that's up in the air. For whatever reason, it feels like a Tampa Bay Rays year where they're coming out and winning this division for the first time since 2021.
So you had Rays, Yankees, and Red Sox making the playoffs?
Yep, and the Orioles just miss.
So I also have to
hold them accountable for what they're doing here, by the way. The Orioles, like, if they make the playoffs, it foregoes all the stuff we're talking about here.
I'm giving them one more shot. One more shot. I just like the offense enough. So I have the Red Sox, Orioles, and Blue Jays. So also 3 teams, but only one of the same teams making the playoffs, which I think gives my bracket Rangers, only team coming out of the AL West. Let me just make sure I don't. All right. So Rangers, only team coming out of the West. Red Sox, Orioles, Blue Jays, all coming out of the East. And then AL Central, I had Royals and Tigers coming out. So
I might have
that's
too many
my
teams. I
AL
have to go
bracket.
through it again and listen back. I might have some teams I have to be cutting for our prediction show.
Well, we have time. We have time. We're going
We
to
do have
record
time.
that in a couple days.
Yeah, so I mean, very interesting. Definitely, we saved the best for last. I really think that was the best conversation. I mean, I loved all the conversations, but I think this had a lot of meat on the bone and a lot of. It'd be interesting to come back here in 6-7 months and be like, "Whoa, that was interesting." So we hope you guys enjoyed our divisional previews. We went through all of them, and we've been dropping content all week for you guys, and we will be continuing to do that, of course, as the season kicks off. We'll be doing our award preview, our division preview. Or what else are we previewing on that show? Just kind of
So
a
we're going to go
primer
through
for the
our
season, right?
Yeah, we're going to go through our playoff bracket and actually like not only say the 6 teams from each league, but also say who's going to win, like who's going to match up and who's going to win, like and who's going to go to the World Series and who's going to win all the way through the bracket. We'll go through that. Maybe we can get some graphics up here for the YouTube people or something. We'll see. We'll see how ambitious we want to be there. And then, yeah, obviously the MVPs, the Cy Youngs, Rookie of the Years. And I think that'll probably take us through. I don't think it's going to be an exceptionally long episode, but to kind of put a bow on these episodes, I feel like almost like a wrap up of our predictions before the full season starts. Obviously, the Tokyo games will have been played at that point, or one of them. But we want to get the before the traditional opening day, get the full predictions in there.
Oh, absolutely. And we'll be back to our normal scheduled episodes and getting some guests in here, potentially some NCAA conversation. I've been chomping at the bit. I've been watching so much college baseball. I see, Devin on Twitter. If you guys are following over at Table Setters Pod, you should be. Devin had a lot of conversations about Wake Forest and what they're doing. Some good application of the Fangraph stats that are now being able to be sorted and looked at. And it's been a great tool to look at some of these players. And I tell you, man, it really is enlightening. And I tell you, if you're just a Major League Baseball fan, you're like, I'm not really interested in college baseball for whatever reason, you should definitely dip your toe in, because I feel like now I have a better understanding of player development and seeing some of these players. And you guys saw on Instagram and on Twitter, I was at the Stony Brook Seton Hall game on Saturday, and just the level of play of the Coastal Atlantic, seeing what they brought to the table. God damn, man, there was like some really great play. Aiden Robbins from Seton Hall, he's a player, dude. This guy went out there and crushed it. There was a lot to be excited about. And for me, I mean, go to your local college and check out some of these games. They're either really affordable or cheap. Stony Brook had accessibility where you just go up and it's free every single day. You can go to these games. Absolutely fantastic. It really is one of those things where you got to appreciate baseball around you. And like, I wonder why I never went, you know what I mean? Never had the opportunity to go. Not sure why I never did, but it opened up a whole different world for me. I'm watching all different types of baseball and seeing the games through a different lens. And that's thankful to the people out there. Ben Upton bringing that to our attention and giving us the scope. And, you and I taking the dive, and I watched Campbell bring all the noise every single week. So it's been fantastic.
Yeah, all 3 of our teams had some success this past week in Delaware, Campbell, and Wake Forest doing good things. Obviously, Wake the big boy there, but Delaware, Campbell holding it down as well. CAA is an interesting conference. Like, no one's really taking it by stride right now. We'll get more into college, but conference play starting for some conferences this past weekend, some this week. So it's really firing up. Lots of cool stuff. And you're right, it just opens up the whole scope of baseball now, like being able to follow these dudes. We've always liked to follow the prospects at the minor league level. Now we get to follow them even before that. And what's better than that, man? It's just more fandom.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. So we'll be back next week, or later this week, I should say, doing our predictions episode. Please give us a follow on Instagram or on Twitter. Follow us our YouTube page as well at Table Setters Baseball. Give us some love over there. Leave a 5-star review if you can as we get the season started. Let's start off in the right way, and I'll get ready for the season as we go. But excited for the season to kick off. Everybody enjoy the Tokyo series. If you're watching that, make sure you guys are checking out. But tune back in later this week for the further episodes here at Table Setters. We appreciate everything you guys do for us, and we'll be back and talk to you after a while.